سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله.
وقل ربي أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك ربي أن يحضرون. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وشفيعنا وحبيب قلوبنا المصطفى الأمجد والرسول المسدد أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولا تزر وازرة وزر أخرى وإن تدعو مثقلة إلى حملها لا يحمل منه شيء ولو كان ذا قربى إنما تنذر الذين يخشون ربهم بالغيب وأقاموا الصلاة ومن تزكى فإنما يتزكى لنفسه وإلى الله المصير. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. والسلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. Dear brothers and sisters, once again we gather today to discuss the topic of tazkieh nafs. And in the previous episodes we talked about tazkieh nafs, or purification of the self in a general sense. And we also talked about the qualities that are necessary for the one who is seeking to purify themselves. We talked about justice or adl, and in that respect we talked about the balance that must be established in life. And we talked about sabr, or patience, as the tool that is necessary to maintain the balance in life, so that one does not fall into disturbance, one does not lose balance in life and cause unnecessary negativities and problems for themselves. And again, once again to reiterate, patience, as was discussed in the previous episode, is the ability to keep the nafs under control, to keep the self under control when there is some power, something trying to disturb it. That could be a test, it could be a trial that will cause you to despair, will cause you pain or sorrow or lose hope, that will cause disturbance. Or it could be the wiswas of the shaitan that causes you to fall into disturbance. Sabr is the quality that allows you to maintain control over your nafs when something is trying to make you lose control, when something is trying to cause disturbance. And we know that it is the goal of the believer to tread through life with these challenges in front of them. And as you overcome the challenges, and as you tread the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you find that you are achieving purification of the self by showing the qualities that Allah wants you to show. And particularly in the qualities that are very important for overcoming challenges. Sabr is one of those qualities. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, أَحَسِبَ النَّاسَ أَن يُتْرَكُوا أَن يَقُولُوا آمَنَّا وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ. Do the people think that they will claim, they will announce their belief, they will say that we are believers, and that they will be left without a trial? You will have to face a trial. And it is the believer who knows that the trial is in front and is prepared to face it with the tools given to him or to her. That tool, one of the tools, is sabr, is patience. And we previously mentioned that Al-Imam Ali alayhi salam said that there are three types of patience. There is the patience during bala, during difficulty, during trial and musibah. There is a second type of patience, which is the patience that is required in keeping the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then there is the third type of patience that is required when something is trying to make you become disobedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we must begin to understand these different types of patience and how they are to be applied to our daily lives if we are going to purify ourselves and maintain balance in our lives. We previously discussed the first category. Today, inshaAllah, we will talk about the second and the third category. Patience when you have to be obedient to Allah, and patience when something is trying to make you become disobedient to Allah. Na'udhu billah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this test will continue. No matter how long you live, the more you have to struggle, the more you are trying to achieve purity, the test is going to be in front of you. There is no easy way to achieving purification. It is a difficult task and it requires hard work. And the Holy Quran says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ حَتَّى نَعْلَمَ الْمُجَاهِدِينَ مِنْكُمْ وَالصَّابِرِينَ وَنَبْلُوَ أَخْبَارَكُمْ. Allah says, we will test you, we will try you and put trials upon you until we know those of you who are struggling against themselves, who are doing jihad against themselves and striving against themselves, and those people who are the sabirin, those people who are patient. We will test what you are made of. We will test your resolve in this matter. And so you know that the test is going to be long. The test is going to be constant. The difficulty might be constant, but in it is a chance and an opportunity to improve and to become better. And so on this quest of self-improvement, we want to figure out a way to have greater control on everything that we do. We want to be able to say, we are the ones who are controlling our actions. We are the ones through our reason who determine what choices we make. It is not shaitan who will determine for us or instigate us. It is not our whims or our lowly desires that will instigate us. It is not our emotion, and it is certainly not response to what other people do. It is the reason that God has given to us and the light of His guidance by which we will make our choices and be in complete control. So we ask ourselves the question then, why do we falter? Why do we make mistakes? Why is it sometimes we are obedient to Allah and na'udhu billah, sometimes we disobey Allah? Every human being makes mistakes. And so we must analyze why it is that we falter and we make mistakes and we come into problems. Obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which requires patience, is a very difficult task. It is a constant process. There is not 1 second of your day, 1 minute of your day in which you can say that I cannot be obedient to God or I don't want to be obedient to God. It is a task, ta'atillah is a task that requires persistence, requires striving, and it requires a great deal of strength, brothers and sisters. It is a continuous struggle against the lower nafs. And so if it is a continuous struggle, if it is something that continues for life, it requires continuous patience. And so, as an example, to wake up in the morning for Salat al-Fajr requires strength. When sleep is the deepest, when the sleep is most precious in the early hours of the dawn, then you must have patience and strength to be able to get up and fulfill your obligation and be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the same way, fasting in the month of Ramadan when it is very hot is very difficult. You need patience and strength so you don't crumble and fall apart and say, no, I will not fast. You need patience to say, I will fast and I will fulfill my obligation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hajj is another beautiful example of where patience is necessary. You go and you face the challenges of this great journey that you take towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, seeking His closeness. And it requires a great deal of patience from one aspect to another. And so the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requires patience. The fulfilling of His obligations upon us requires patience. And patience, why? Because it requires us to persevere. It requires us to be consistent. The best of people, the best of believers, the ones who are making the greatest strides towards tazkieh to nafs, purification of the self, are those people who are constantly striving. In every minute they are reminding themselves of their obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in every moment when there is an opportunity to be obedient to Allah, they absolutely take that opportunity and they do it. That is a form of patience, brothers and sisters. And it is something that requires us to maintain control on our nafs and not let go. Not hand over control of our nafs to somebody else or something else. On the same token, another thing that can make us falter and make a mistake and cause problems for ourselves is disobedience of Allah. And so disobedience of Allah comes oftentimes when we think that act of ma'siyah, that act of disobedience is going to give us some benefit. I will do something, na'udhu billah, against the rules of God because I feel there is some pleasure in it for me. I will gain something out of it. I will benefit. A person goes and robs and steals and takes money because he perceives there to be a benefit in him taking that wealth that does not belong to him. However, he has done an injustice, not only to the person he stole from, but on himself as well. To be able to resist that disobedience, to be able to resist the urge to be disobedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to transgress His rules, requires patience. It requires sabr. And that is a very, very difficult thing. And in fact, Imam Ali alayhi salam says, the toughest and the greatest of patience is the one in which you have to resist being disobedient to God. That is the greatest form of patience, because there is something that is pulling you out of control, out of balance, tempting you towards breaking God's rule and to be disobedient, and instead you are saying, no, I will remain in control of my nafs. I will show sabr and control my nafs and not allow it to be swayed towards disobedience. In the West particularly, and this I direct primarily to our young brothers and sisters who live in the West, we face a great deal of peer pressure. We face a great deal of influence in this country, and in the culture of things that we cannot do as a Muslim, as a believer in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our children go to the high schools, to the middle schools, and with the other children, they see things that are being done that they cannot do themselves, and they are tempted because their friends who are not Muslims, they do these things. And so they are tempted to do them as well. And that peer pressure is a very great thing. And that peer pressure is drawing them away from Allah's obedience. It is taking them towards disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In that instance, it is up to our parents to remind the young ones, and the young ones themselves who have great reasoning, to say to themselves, we must have patience in this period. When something is tempting me to be disobedient to God, I will be in a state of patience. It is very, very difficult, particularly, and I know this growing up in this country, that the temptation to do what your friends are doing, to participate in the activities that your friends are participating, activities that may be un-Islamic and inappropriate for a believer in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is a very difficult thing, and it requires a great deal of strength and a great deal of patience to say, no, my identity is that of a Muslim. I may be an American, but I am an American Muslim. I am bound by the rules of Islam, and I will not engage in those activities that are un-Islamic. It is very difficult to do that. And so, in that case, patience also comes in the form of precaution. Ihtiyat. Precaution means, okay, maybe my friends are participating in un-Islamic acts. They are my friends, so I will be in their company, I will hang out with them and stay with them. I will not commit the un-Islamic act, but I will stay in their company because they are my friends. There is nothing wrong with this. I am not committing the un-Islamic or the haram act. I am just hanging out in the company of friends. However, in this is a great pitfall, because we can become tempted. And so the right course of action is to stay away from any situation in which haram acts are being performed. Any acts that are un-Islamic, we must stay away from those situations so we are not tempted. This is another form of patience, to impose control upon the nafs so that the nafs does not come into a situation where it will become disturbed, where it will fall out of balance. Brothers and sisters, this is a very hard task. The path to Allah is very difficult. The obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requires great strength, because at every turn the shaitan is coming to us from in front of us, from behind us, from both sides of us, to try to make us become disobedient. In the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he was commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the dream to sacrifice his son Ismail alayhi salam, you all know this story, that when he told his son of his dream, informed his son of the dream, the son, who was very devoted to Allah, a pious believer, a prophet of God, he said, my father, do what you have been commanded, and you will find me a participant in that and a obedient servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You all know that when Ibrahim alayhi salam was proceeding to perform the act of sacrifice on Ismail alayhi salam, that the shaitan came to him. There are stories from the Qasas al-Anbiya, the stories of the prophets, that the shaitan came to Ibrahim alayhi salam in the form of an old man. And he said to him, "O Ibrahim, where are you going? What are you going to do? You are going to commit an act, you are going to kill your son. Your son is innocent, he has done nothing, and yet you are going to sacrifice him and kill him. Your community who follows you, they will see you and they will become misguided because of your act. Ibrahim alayhi salam knew he had to fulfill the obligation to Allah. He knew he had to be obedient to Allah. He is a masoom, a chosen of God. And so he disregarded the shaitan. His taqwa, his belief, his sabr was so complete that he knew he would disregard the shaitan and that he had to fulfill the act of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You all know that Ismail alayhi salam was not sacrificed, and in his place an animal was placed. But the example is for us, that when the shaitan comes to us and starts to whisper in our ears and tries to take us away from the path of obedience and create disillusionment inside of us, we must remind ourselves that our obedience is to God. That immediate reminder is a form of sabr, brothers and sisters. It is a form of patience, because when something is trying to pull us away, we immediately come back and say, no, we are in control of our nafs through the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the scholars, the ulama, describe that patience has some qualities to it, some attributes to it that make it important to recognize, so that we can have more patience, so we can begin to create and cultivate more patience inside of us. One of those qualities is eagerness, or raghbah. And that eagerness that we have inside of us must be for the great reward that Allah will give us in the next world, in the akhirah. And that is the reward of paradise, Jannah. And it will allow us to ignore the evil temptations. If all we see is the life of this world, then the temptations will grab us and take us. But if we believe that the true reward is in the next world, that the life of this world is transient, then we will ignore the temptations and we will strive for greater purification of the self. The second attribute of patience is that we must have fear. We must fear the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we become more pious, that fear turns into cognizance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We must not fear in the sense of cowering, but fear that we transgress His rules, because if we transgress His rules, we do dhulm on ourselves and we create imbalance in our lives. The third thing we must adopt is we must have piety. We must have taqwa inside of us. This is a quality that ties into sabr in a very great deal. And as I mentioned to you previously, many of these great qualities that lead to tazkieh, to nafs, purification of the self, they are intertwined. They are interrelated, and they influence each other. Piety is the one quality that allows you to observe the rules of God. You become conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as you become conscious that the trials and the difficulties will come as well. And lastly, one of the recommendations, particularly of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, is that we must anticipate death. We must remember that death is around the corner. That at any moment when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses, we can leave this world. And when that happens, there will be no more opportunity for us to ask for forgiveness or to rectify the negative actions that, na'udhu billah, we have committed in our lives. And so we must remind ourselves that these are the attributes of patience, and we must have them and we must live by them at every moment. As I said to you, particularly with respect to our young people in this world, we need resolve. We need determination. And the example of Ibrahim alayhi salam in the Holy Quran is a very great example and a story for us of resolve. And the Holy Quran says that فَاصْبِرْ كَمَا صَبَرَ أُولُو الْعَزْمِ مِنَ الرُّسُلِ. Have patience just like the patience of those who were ulul azm. The ulul azm messengers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala were the ones who had the greatest resolve. They were foremost in their resolve to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah is saying, have patience just like the patience of those prophets and those messengers who had the greatest resolve in front of Allah. That just shows that the path of Allah requires us to be very strong, unfaltering, unwavering, not falling out of balance. And in fact, the advice of Luqman alayhi salam to his son is very much along the same lines, giving the same sort of advice. He says in the ayah of the Holy Quran, Ya bunay, aqim as-salat wa amur bil ma'ruf wa anha 'anil munkar wasbir 'ala ma asabak inna dhalika min azmil umur. He says to his son Luqman, as the ayah describes, O my son, do your worship. Pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Stand up for that which is right. Amr bil ma'ruf wa anha anil munkar. Reject and deny everything that is evil and wrong. Stand for the truth. Deny evil and falsehood. Wasbir ala ma asabak. Be patient on anything that comes upon you. Strive for patience. Remain in patience in any condition, any situation. Inna dhalika min azmil umur. That is a matter of great resolve. Allah is saying, be patient in every situation. It is a matter of great resolve. Be steadfast. Those people who have the greatest problems in life are the ones who crumble when problem comes upon them. They are the ones who, when Allah wants them to be obedient, they crumble and they cannot be obedient. When a matter is in front of them in which they are being tempted towards disobedience, they crumble and they fall apart and they commit the haram act and they are disobedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we find that sabr, if we hold on to it, will have great benefit for us. It will give us great strength on this road towards purification. It will, as the ulama describe, as the scholars describe, it will give us steadfastness and firmness. You must have resolve. You must be firm and strong on the path, on the goal that you want to achieve. And that goal is thorough purification of the self, to have qurbah, closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Practicing sabr while enjoining what is good, while standing up for the truth, amar bil ma'ruf wa nahi anil munkar, and rejecting that which is false. The second thing is, patience will give you rational decision-making process. If a choice is in front of you, one which is haram, na'udhu billah, and one which is halal, patience will allow you to rationally and logically decide between the two and say, no, this choice is the right halal choice, I will choose it, and I will reject the choice that is haram. I will stay away from the choice that is haram. And in doing so, you will find obedience to Allah. The more we are obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the greater our purification and tazkieh of the self. And so in that case, sabr will increase our awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our ta'ah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is our obedience. And in this sense, we will become, or we will strive to become those people who not only are doing for the pleasure of God, for the satisfaction of God, but will earn the satisfaction of God, will earn the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you can see how patience is so integral and important towards how we behave, not just in periods of difficulties, but in every of our action. Obedience to Allah and staying away from disobedience of Allah. In this, we see the best of example in the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, and in particular, we talk about our holy imams, the imams of the Ahl al-Bayt, and the legacy of Fatima Zahra salamullahi alayha. The Holy Quran describes, and if we want to see a model of patience, we want to see how one remains steadfast in obedience of Allah and staying away from ma'siyah or disobedience of Allah, we see from the Holy Quran that it says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنْهُمْ أَئِمَّةً يَهْدُونَ بِأَمْرِنَا لَمَّا صَبَرُوا وَكَانُوا بِآيَاتِنَا يُوقِنُونَ. We made of them, Allah says, we made of them imams. Certain of them we made into imams. They guided by our idhn, by our permission. They were guides and they provided the guidance. لَمَّا صَبَرُوا, when they showed patience, when they demonstrated the quality of patience, and they were certain in our signs. They had certainty and yaqeen in our signs. So you know that the imam is one who shows the utmost of patience, who has the quality of patience ingrained inside of him, not just in the periods of difficulty, but in every decision, every choice that is made in life. We talked about previously the legacy of Ibrahim alayhi salam, that he would not allow shaitan, he showed patience and did not allow shaitan to dissuade him from his task of sacrificing Ismail alayhi salam, that he followed through with the command of Allah. He did not disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We talked about that, and the Holy Quran describes that when he was ransomed, when Ismail alayhi salam was ransomed, there is a concept that the dhibh al-azim had to follow, that the Quran says a great sacrifice had to come. And so we all know, the followers of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad alayhim as-salatu was-salam, we all know that that great sacrifice came in the house of Fatima Zahra, and in particularly in the life of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salatu was-salam. Brothers and sisters, the path of Imam Hussein is the path of patience. The legacy of Imam al-Hussein is the legacy of patience. What he stood for at Karbala in fighting on the 10th of Muharram, on the day of Ashura, was the message of patience. The patience to say, I will stand up for obedience to God and I will reject everything that is evil. Amar bil ma'ruf wa nahi anil munkar. I will show patience even though it will require me to give the greatest of sacrifice. Dhibhin azim. I will have to give the greatest of sacrifice, but I will show patience in giving that sacrifice. Why? Because in giving that sacrifice, I am being obedient to Allah. We must ask ourselves this question, that when we do something, are we doing it obedience to Allah? And if so, is our patience pushing us towards that obedience? That is a great thing. And it gives us reassurance that if I show patience in the way of Allah, Allah will be pleased with me. If I show patience and I'm obedient to Allah, Allah will reward me. I will not be disobedient to Allah. In that case, we emulate and we follow the actions of Imam al-Hussein. He never ever disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When the opportunity was in front of him and he had controlled the water and the army of Hur was in front of him and they were thirsty and many of them were close to death due to thirst, he did not deny them the water. In fact, some of the stories say that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam even took the skin of water and poured the water with his hand into the mouth of one of the soldiers of Hur, showing, demonstrating that patience is what controls and maintains the balance. That is a great lesson for us. Our Imam is ma'soom, he is pure, so his actions are an example for us. Our Imam says in a very famous quotation, which I'm sure you all know, and this quotation is a great lesson for us, and so I will read it for you now. Our Imam, Al-Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he says, خُطَّ الْمَوْتُ عَلَى وُلْدِ آدَمَ مَخَطَّ الْقَلَادَةِ عَلَى جِيدِ الْفَتَاةِ. He says, death has encircled the children of Adam. Death has encircled the progeny of Adam alayhi salam, just like the necklace is so elegantly placed around the neck of a young girl, the neck of a young child, a young girl. He says, وَمَا أَوْلَهَنِي إِلَىٰ أَسْلَافِي اشْتِيَاقَ يَعْقُوبَ إِلَىٰ يُوسُف. I have not stopped feeling eagerness to be reunited with my family. I am so eager to be reunited with my family, just like Yaqub was eager to be reunited with Yusuf alayhim as-salam. وَخِيَّرَ لِي مَصْرَعْ أَنَا لَاقِيهِ كأني بأوصالي تقطعها عسلان الفلوات بين النواويس وكربلاء. It is this fate that has been decided for me as a divine fate. I am going to Karbala. This is Allah's choice for me. Brothers and sisters, we must ask ourselves, what has Allah chosen for me? And are we being patient when going towards that choice that Allah has chosen for us? Are we being patient in the trial that Allah has chosen for us? Imam Hussein says, what has been chosen for me is the divine fate. I am seeing it as if I see the pieces of my body torn. The members of my body have been torn by the wolves between Nawawis and Karbala. I can see it in front of me. He says, لا محيص عن يوم خط بالقلم. There is no escape from the day on which Allah has prescribed for you, fated for you. You cannot run away from it. The decision is in front of you. You must take it and accept it as Allah's will for you. رضى الله رضانا أهل البيت نصبر على بلائه ويوفينا أجر الصابرين. Al-Imam al-Hussein says that we are subservient to the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is our pleasure is in seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Allah's satisfaction. We are patient. نصبر على بلائه ويوفينا أجر الصابرين. We are patient on His trials that He has placed upon us, and Allah will reward us for those trials, Al-Imam al-Hussein says. Brothers and sisters, this is an example for us. This is a lesson for us. In every choice of ours, in every decision of ours, we must bring patience. And we must ask ourselves the questions. Are we being like Imam al-Hussein? Are we making the choice that is going to be the satisfaction of God so that we can be of the sabirin, the patient, and that we get the rewards of those people who are patient? We must have patience in every aspect of our lives. And Allah promises us a great reward. He says, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ لَنُبَوِّئَنَّهُم مِّنَ الجَّنَّةِ غُرَفًا تَجْرِي مِن تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا نِعْمَ أَجْرُ الْعَامِلِينَ. Allah says those people who believe and those people who did good actions, Allah will give them stations in the Jannah, in the paradise. He will give them mansions in the paradise. Rivers will be running under it. They will be in there, khalidina fiha. They will be there forever. And it will be a great achievement for those who are committed to action, who act in the right way. And then it says in the very next ayah, الَّذِينَ صَبَرُوا وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. Those people who were patient and had complete and total dependence on Allah. We see finally that patience again is so important in every aspect of our lives. Patience is so necessary when we make choices. We must not make choices hastily without patience. We must think about our choices. We must think about whether our actions are obedience to Allah or, God forbid, disobedience to Allah. And if we engender that patience and adopt it, it will increase our purification towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And with this, I wish all of you well. And until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.